Really would like to welcome you to tonight's speaker series. I'm Tara Sparks. I'm the Chief Academic Officer for the district. And tonight we have a very information-rich series of information for you on assessment, our K-12 assessment plan. Before we get started and before I introduce our presenters tonight, want to give you a quick update on what the session will look like. So as I said, it's going to be an information-rich presentation. There is a Q&A button that you have on your screen. So we ask that if you have any questions while we're sharing information, to go ahead and ask your questions in the Q&A. I will collect those over the course of the session. And then at the end, we'll save some time to break those questions into themes and answer the various questions that you have. So again, the Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen is where you will be able to ask any questions. It is my pleasure to introduce tonight's panelists from the teaching and learning team. These are all folks who are leading the work related to teaching and learning, whether that's our assessment, it's our curriculum development, it's our instructional practices, and how all those weave together to support our students. So I welcome Dr. Jill Lawson, our Executive Director of Assessment and Student Services, Dr. Craig Hamby, our Executive Director of Elementary Education, Dr. Ronnie Zagora, our Executive Director of Secondary Education, and Dr. Sarah Valter, our District Literacy Coordinator. So at this time, I turn it over to them. Thank you.
Okay, well, I'll go ahead and get us started. I want to say hello to everyone, and I am very excited to share our Lindbergh Assessment Plan with you. We have quite a bit to unpack tonight, so I am going to go ahead and dive right in, but please know that at any time, if you want to follow up after this presentation, I am available to talk at any time. So we will go ahead and get started. Tony, will you please switch slides? Okay, so in education, we often use a lot of acronyms and terms that may be unfamiliar. So I wanted to start out by just giving a list of some of the most common acronyms that we will use throughout this presentation, and ask you if you have your phone available or ready to go ahead and snap a picture of it if you can, if you want to use it as a reference as we go through. But I do promise that I will avoid using acronyms only, and I will try to say the whole term as we move through the presentation. Next slide. Okay, so we're going to dig right into the Lindbergh Assessment Plan. And one of the things I want you to note is that this is not all inclusive of our full assessment plan, but these are some main components that I felt like were important to share for tonight. We're going to talk about state assessments, the grade level assessment, and the in-course assessment. Also our district assessments that focus on reading, math, and social emotional. I did put down classroom assessments, although we're not going to dig very much into that tonight. And also our college career assessments that are offered for our students as they enter into high school. I did include the classroom assignment, or excuse me, the classroom assessment component, because I really do think those are a very important part of how we collect evidence of student learning, and definitely want to acknowledge those because those provide our students and families with the most immediate feedback on how students are doing on particular skills. So we will go ahead and start to dig in. Okay, so the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, also often referred to as DESE, requires that districts participate in the state testing. Another part of that requirement is that our students participate at a 95% participation rate. So we know that this is a very important part of accountability for us with the state. And so here are 3 assessments that are required by the state. So if we look in the blue section, we have the spring state testing, and that window is coming up here really soon. Those assessments are aligned to the Missouri Learning Standards. That's what that MLS is for. And those are, within those are the grade level assessments and the in-course assessments. And so in the spring, I think it's starting April 7th, you will see schedules, maybe some notification from your building principals that students in grades 3 through 8 will participate in the grade level assessment for English language arts and math. And then students who are in 5th and 8th grade will participate in a science grade level assessment. Now, when students complete coursework at the high school, or if they're in middle school and taking a course that is a credit-bearing course that aligns with the in-a-course assessment requirement, they will participate in the EOC. And those EOCs are administered when students complete Algebra 1, English 2, Government, Biology, and we also have an in-the-course assessment for personal finance, although not every single student will participate in that particular EOC. For our students who receive English language learning services through our district, the state also requires that we administer the Access for ELL. So students in K through 12 participate in this assessment and take it for listening, speaking, writing, and reading. For our students who are eligible through state criteria and have an individual education plan, also called an IEP, they participate in the MAP alternative assessment. And so they do not participate in the spring state testing or the GLA or the EOC. Instead, they participate in an assessment that is customized to help show growth in the learning they have. And those blueprints are set by their individual case managers. So those are the three big state assessments that we have this fall, and also the Access for ELL starts in January, and the MAP alternative takes place throughout the year. But those are the big three state assessments. When we receive those results from our state assessments, starting this year, we added another detail to our student information system, which I'll refer to as SIS. This is an example of what you will see on SIS when you're looking at your student's report. You will receive a notification from your building principals in the e-note that says that the state assessment, the grade level assessment, or the in-a-course assessments are available in SIS, and it will give directions on how to access those. And you will be able to go in and see how your students are doing. So I'm going to show you an example of a student. This is a 5th grader right now. And this student, if you look at the top bar where it says ELA, which stands for English Language Arts, grade level assessment, you can see that we're looking at the top bar has 4th grade actually. And so I can see a scale score of 393 and a level description, which says proficient. When I go down one tab, if you will, 3rd grade, I see this COVID indicator. And what that COVID indicator means is that during the 1920 school year, the state did not require any districts. They actually didn't even administer the grade level assessment. So we put that code in there to show that that was the year, and that is why there is no score in there. If you go to the next section below where it says ELA, GLA details, we can get another, we can get a little bit more information. We see the students' window. They took the test in spring in 2021. We see the grade. We see the scale score, the performance level, but now I can break it down into those domains that are on the grade level assessment. And so for the ELA assessment, those 4 domains are reading, research, writing, and listening. And I can take a look at what their scale score was for each of those particular domains. So if you follow up after this, or if you've already been on there, you may already know, but this is one way for you to say, wow, my kiddo is excelling here. These are some of my student strengths. Here's some areas, like how can we work with the teacher and help support the student, or maybe it's just like I can mostly identify where the kiddo is definitely exceeding and when it comes to those different domains. And so research on this particular one is definitely that student's particular strength. Going on to the next slide, here's an example of it for mathematics. And so I have 4th grade, that scale score proficient level. And then for 3rd grade, I can see that was the year of that the test was not administered. And then when I go down to the math grade level assessment details, I can look at those particular domains for mathematics, such as number-based 10, fractions, algebraic thinking, geometry, measurement, data, and statistics. And so it helps me to look through my students' performance and see where their strengths are and where there's some areas to grow. Going on to the next slide. All of that probably meant very little when you're just looking at a score. So when we send those notifications for the results, we also provide the guide to interpreting results from the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. It is a good idea to look through these because they provide performance level descriptors. So the big one I have on here is for, it's just a sample. But if you scroll through the entire manual, you would find your student's grade level, and you would be able to say, okay, here was my child's scale score. What range is that in? And what does that even mean? So to score in the proficient level, they provide these particular descriptors of what it means and what a student can do to perform at that particular level. So I blew up the ELA one, but over to the right of the screen, you can see the mathematic one for third grade as well. And so again, it's not as beefy as the ELA one, but it definitely provides just a little bit more information about what that particular scale score means. And the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education creates those cut scores for those different performance levels. I'm going to go on to the next slide. So that was a little bit about our state assessments. I do want to say that our state assessments are really important, and we do really care a lot about how our students are doing on those. One of the things that we have noticed is the time in which those scores are sent to us and provided is, we wish it was a little bit more in a timely manner so we can give our students more immediate feedback on their performance and how they are doing. And so because those results have kind of, I guess, gone on into the summer and students are all thinking, no more school, I'm not thinking about any of this. It's kind of at that time, just we're sitting on this information. And so one of the things that the district has identified a need for is ability to provide more immediate, useful feedback for our students on how they are doing, so that we can get involved and support them wherever their needs are. But also to look at the data that is provided to us in a more immediate way, and say, what are some of those areas that we are just really thriving and doing really well? What are some of those areas we need to grow? And so one of the things that we are working towards is providing a district universal screener process that will support our multi-tier systems of support. And it allows us to get more immediate feedback to intervene and help for students, and also look at that big data on how we are doing overall and where we need to allocate resources and supports for our students, families, and our teachers. So here I have the big three that we're really wanting to, I guess, grow throughout the years. We have some really strong assessment tools that we're going to share with you tonight, and some areas that we want to expand some of our work on how we're supporting our students. So we have literacy, math, and social emotional. And I'm going to dig into social emotional first. So this year, we administered the Social Academic Emotional Behavioral Rating Scale. And this was administered to students in third grade. This is part of our Lindbergh Assessment Plan, and we call it the SABRE test. So just if I use the term SABRE, it's the Social Academic Emotional Behavior Rating Scale. And so it's broken down into 3 domains: the social, academic, and behavior. And so within those, we have 7 questions for social, 6 questions for academic, and 7 questions for behavior. And on the next slide, you'll see the actual questions that students are asked regarding those particular domains. And so if you have a camera and you want to take a picture of it, this is a good opportunity to do that. However, before we administer this assessment, our school counselors send out information and let you know that this assessment is coming up. So you can see when students participate in this, they answer the questions, and there's little visuals to help them. They answer the questions with never, sometimes, often, and always. So I'll just give you a second to take a look at some of those questions, but I'm also very happy to provide those after the fact as well. Okay, next slide. So when we talk about social emotional screening, one of the things that we want to do is expand it to more grades so that we can collect more information on students, because we really want to capture those big three: literacy, math, and social emotional needs. Those data points will really help us identify students in need, and also looking at our big picture programming, instructional needs, climate, culture as well. When we talk about social emotional screening and making sure our kids feel connected to the learning, I always have these great questions come in from our families. And one of those is, why is social emotional screening so important? And the answer to that is, we really want to take a proactive approach to identify and support students in need. We want to monitor our school-wide interventions and the effectiveness of the supports that we have in place for our students. And we also want to measure what we value, and what we value is student satisfaction. I mean, our ultimate goal is to have happy kids that have the skills to meet those academic needs. And we also want to create that environment where students feel connected and supported. That is very important. We want our students to be excited to come to school, and we want them to have healthy relationships with their peers and our staff. Another two questions that pop up are, can I opt my child out of social emotional screening? Absolutely. The answer to that is yes. You can opt your child out of these assessments by contacting your building administrator. And then another really great question that has come in, and I'm fortunate because I get to participate in the Student Life Board Advisory, and I have amazing parents who ask really good questions. So these are two that I know are very important, and so I wanted to include them in the presentation today. So who will see my child's data and information? And you can think about this beyond just social emotional. And so the people in our district who see your child's information in your data are the ones who are going to have the impact and about the desired results we want to see for your student. So that is the classroom teacher, the counselor, the building level administrator, coaches who help facilitate the best instructional practices in our district, and also our specialists. And that could include special education teachers if the child has received English language learning services, and interventionists who are going to be supporting students. So that is just a little bit more, but if you have more questions on that, I'm glad to look into those and answer those for you as well. We also have a suicide prevention and awareness screening that we have in our district. And this is for middle school and high school. I want to, even though it's not, I wouldn't say a very formal normed type assessment, I really felt it was worth sharing with everyone. And that is our signs of suicide presentation and the questions that are asked after that particular presentation. We partner through Children's Service Fund with two different agencies. Now, only one agency will come in at a time, but both of these agencies are available to do the signs of suicide presentations for our students. We're really looking at their prevention and awareness and doing everything we can to ensure our students are safe and healthy. But if they are having any kind of stress or anything, that they also know how to seek help. And that is another very important part of this, this initiative. And so after the students after the students in the middle school and high school receive this presentation, they're asked a question, and it's, do you need to talk to anybody? And there's a little bit more to it. Do you need to talk to anybody right now? Do you need to talk to anybody within the few days? Do you know someone who will need to talk to somebody? And so it's just our way for our students to be able to contact if there's any signs of concern. This presentation mostly focuses on signs of depression, signs of anxiety, healthy habits. And so this is not, like I said, not a normed assessment, but definitely something where our students are asked a question. And before any of these presentations happen, our principals and counselors notify all of our parents so that, again, like in the other question, can I opt my child out of these presentations? And the answer to that is absolutely yes. Moving on to the next slide. So we're going to dig into more of our district academic assessments. And before we do, I want to talk about the windows for assessment. So we have a fall, winter, and spring assessment window for our assessments, our district assessments regarding reading and math. And so in the fall, when our students participate in the benchmark assessment, we get what we call performance data. This is where our student is right now. Here's where they are when they entered my classroom at the beginning of the year. And then we assess in the winter, and this is where it gets really fun looking at the data. We get not only performance data, but we get growth data. So we can see how is our child, or excuse me, how has your child or your student grown from the fall to the winter? Are we making the right kind of growth? Are we seeing positive gains? If not, what are some things we can do? And then in the spring, they're provided, or they're administered another assessment. And again, we have not only performance data, but we have growth data. And now it's really exciting because we can look at the growth from the beginning of the year to the end of the year to see how students are doing, and also to celebrate with our students who are making great gains, showing them, you did this. You made this growth. You put in the hard work. You get to reap the benefit of this. This is all you. And so that is one of the exciting ways to look at our data and really capturing that growth our students are putting in, and also for our teachers to celebrate the same thing, thinking or telling themselves those same questions. You did this. You helped our students grow. You make a difference in our students, learning. So going on to that next slide, we're going to dig into reading assessments in the elementary level. And so I'm going to turn this over to Dr. Volter.
Hi, good evening. I'm going to take a few minutes and unpack some of the reading assessments we do in elementary. Our primary suite for doing that assessment is the FastBridge assessment suite. You're going to hear a lot this evening about FastBridge and the different subtests we give. Reading goes through kind of two layers with our elementary students. So the first layer is we do a universal screening, a universal assessment with all students in grades K through 3. Grades 1 through 3 are screened in all 3 windows. Kindergarten doesn't come on board for the screening currently until the winter window. So they have the first semester of the year to kind of acclimate to school. After that screening, as we evaluate the data we collect on students and look across it as a whole, sometimes there are students that we determine we need to do a deeper dive. So you'll also see some additional reading screening. If students are showing any indicators of risk in reading, we go on and we do some additional reading screening with those students. So in the next few minutes, you'll hear a lot about that screening, but a little bit about those additional assessments too. To kind of understand where we are now with our reading assessment, you kind of need to have a little picture of what the last few years have looked like. So starting with the 2018-19 school year, that was our first year where we used FastBridge. And we started doing our universal screening of our primary students. We also that year knew we needed to go a little bit deeper than FastBridge with some students. So we started administering the PAST, which stands for the Phonological Awareness Screening Test by David Kilpatrick. And we were looking specifically at students who were missing some foundational skills in reading. That year was primarily focused from a learning perspective on training, getting our classroom teachers and our reading specialists and our literacy teaching assistants really comfortable going into FastBridge and using all of those tools. We also paired that year with our reading specialists going through IMSE OG training and ongoing professional learning around that. We then spent the next 2 years continuing to build on that screening and our ways that we were looking at data. We also took some time and made some revisions to that additional testing we did because we wanted to make sure that we were looking across all aspects of literacy to make sure that we were identifying specific needs in students and how we could address those needs. We also, during those few years, rolled out letters training for our reading specialists, for our instructional design coaches, and for our English language learner teachers. So they engaged in letters, which also had some assessment pieces with that. We also started unpacking the progress monitoring tools in FastBridge during that time. So when we did have students with some identified needs, we could go in and we could use some of those additional tools in the FastBridge system to continue making sure those students were showing growth over time. This current school year, we have since day one had our reading screening and those additional tests fully aligned and have been working across the year with classroom teachers, our reading specialists, to make sure that that data is impacting classroom instruction and we're supporting students at all levels of need. We also this year have started doing some letters training with classroom teachers, and that's going to continue rolling out over the next few years. Okay, next slide, please. So this is a big picture of what FastBridge screening looks like in grades K through 3. There's a shift between first grade and second grade. So all of the tests that we administer in grades K and 1 are approximately 1 minute in length, and they are all administered. There are 4 of them each screening period. So each of those 4 tests takes about a minute to a minute and a half with students, and they are all administered one-on-one between a teacher or a literacy teacher or a reading specialist and your child. So for K and 1, we give the RAN 1 time a year, which is rapid automatic naming. What that is it is an assessment of how quickly a student can name colors. It actually is not because we're looking at your child's ability to name colors, but it's because we want to see how quickly they can retrieve information, because that has an impact down the road on their reading development and how quickly they can retrieve letter names and letter sounds. The big piece of what we do with kindergarten and first grade is the FastBridge early reading assessment. And this is a quick screener that looks at students' phonics development, phonemic awareness development, and letter sound development tied to that phonics piece. Midway through first grade, the first graders start transitioning into some of the older tests. So midway through first grade, the CBM, which stands for curriculum-based measure, is pulled into that early reading test. And what that is it is 3 passages written at first grade level for the first graders that they're asked to read. They have 1 minute each, and the goal is to see their fluency. How quickly and automatically can they read the text in front of them, based on an average number of words per minute that we would expect a typically developing reader to achieve. That test is also administered in grades 2 and grades 3, all 3 screening periods, as well as it can be administered in grades 4 and up by referral. So if there are students who are showing areas of concern, either for teacher or parents, those students can be referred for that test as well. Every time the students take it, the tests are written at grade level, or the passages are at grade level. So second graders have a second grade set of passages, third graders have a third grade set of passages that they're expected to read. Second and third grade, and 4 through 12, if they're students that you wish to make a referral for, also take 2 additional tests that are entirely computer-based. One of those is A reading, and the A stands for adaptive. So as students are taking the A reading test, the next question they're shown adapts based on how they're answering each question. A reading goes in and looks at general reading skills. So there are questions on fiction comprehension, nonfiction comprehension. It looks at some of the phonics aspects as well as vocabulary. Students also take auto reading, and auto reading is kind of the older student version of that early reading suite. So this looks specifically at its online subtests of phonics, vocabulary, and word recognition. Next slide, please. So to take kind of a deep dive, students always receive a composite score on the early reading subtest. We look specifically at where that composite score falls on national norms, so where your child is falling compared to peers of the same age. When they take early reading, that composite score is made up of several different categories. So one of the things we're specifically looking at is phonemic awareness. We want to know that kids can hear the sounds and words that are spoken and can start to kind of manipulate those sounds. In kindergarten, they take a test called onset sounds, and what that asks kids to do is to look at pictures and to either identify the word that starts with a specific sound or point to a picture that starts with a specific sound. They also take word segmenting all throughout kindergarten and first grade. And that assesses the student's ability to hear a spoken word and to break it into the individual sounds, which is critical for students as they're learning to read and write. So for example, if the spoken word is the word cat, we ask students to segment those sounds into k, a, so we can tell that they can hear each sound in those words. We also look at decoding. And so in kindergarten, the first assessment the kids take is letter sounds. They're presented with a page of letters. They have 1 minute to look at each letter on the page and identify the sounds that letter makes. We also have kindergarten and first grade students taking an assessment called nonsense words. And what that looks at is a student's ability to decode or read a word they have never seen before. So all of the words they see have a consonant, a vowel, and a consonant. They all have a short vowel sound. They're all very predictable. But we want to make sure that they're words that kids haven't memorized and haven't seen in print before, so everyone has a level assessment field. So that assessment is also a 1-minute assessment of how many words students can decode that they've never seen before. The third component that we look at is automaticity and fluency. And so automaticity basically just means, can students recognize a word on sight? So the first assessment that falls into this category is sight words. That starts late in kindergarten and goes throughout first grade. For that assessment, it's also a 1-minute test of how many words can students read in a minute, just individual words that they would see frequently in the text that they're seeing in the classroom. First grade also starts the year with sentence reading. It's a picture book of one of the CBM passages they see later, and then we transition into that CBM that I talked about earlier, where they're reading the 3 1-minute passages in the winter. Okay, next slide, please. So again, FastBridge in grades 2 and up, that CBM stays with students throughout. We're always wanting to monitor how many words per minute students can read to see their automatic word recognition as well as their fluency. A-reading is that online and adaptive assessment. It's very general, so it looks at comprehension as well as looking at some of those phonics vocabulary components. And then auto reading, again, is online, and it's multiple subtests. They're very brief. And they look at vocabulary and phonics skills specifically. Right, next slide, please. So as I said earlier, occasionally we identify students as having some indicators of risk in reading based on the screenings that we're giving. So when we know that we have a student that has some indicators of risk as a reader, we want to take a deep dive and see specifically where are their areas of strength, where are some areas that we can identify that we need to work on, and not only what areas do we need to work on, but specifically where in our scope and sequence do we need to provide instruction to make sure that we help that student accelerate their learning. So across these additional reading tests, we look at 5 different areas. We look at phonemic awareness. So like I explained with the word segmenting a minute ago, that is just, can students take the sounds of words apart? Can they put the sounds of words back together? Can they trade out or add or delete sounds and words? And so the assessment we use for that is the Kilpatrick test. We look at decoding. So can students decode real words of varying lengths? Can they decode nonsense words of varying lengths? And so for that, we use what's called the Letters Word Survey. And it's just, again, a one-on-one assessment with a teacher where kids are asked to read a series of words, and we kind of assess where they need instruction in that area. We look at what we call encoding, which is kind of a fancy way to say spelling and writing words down. And for that, we use the Words Their Way assessment, which really pinpoints specifically what students have mastered as far as spelling and what areas they still need instruction. For comprehension, we use the benchmark assessment system. This is a more comprehensive test where students are given a book, they read the book, and then they discuss the book with a teacher. And for fluency, we use the data from the CBM because that gives us a really good measure of how many words per minute a student can read. Next slide, please. So one of the big questions is, how can you access your child's FastBridge scores? Even if your child is now a 4th grader or a 5th grader, we started that screening in 2018-19, and that data is in SIS. If you have a current K-3 student, that data is in SIS. So the first step is to go to the SIS parent portal on the Lindbergh website. From there, you'll log in. There's a little hamburger menu on the top left. So you'll click that and choose assessment. One thing to note with looking for your assessment scores in SIS, it's only available on the web version. So there are many amazing features that are on that SIS app, but looking at assessment scores is not yet available on there. So if you're looking from your phone, you just want to make sure you go into the browser view instead of using the app. Once you've clicked assessments, there should be a tab that says reading screening across the top. You'll pick that reading screening and then drop down the grade level. That's also just like the MAP scores and other assessment scores sent out when scores are available in the principal e-note. We also always send out a parent guide when those are shared out by principals. So I'm going to unpack a little bit of that for you really quickly. The next slide, please. So this is what your view looks like in SIS. I tried to capture as much as possible. You can kind of see that scroll bar the scores for each of those subtests, which as you saw, there are several, the scores go all the way across the screen. So make sure when you're looking in at scores, you're scrolling across. The top bar here shows what you would see for a kindergarten or first grade student, and it shows the different testing windows. So fall, this is last year's scores, so fall, winter, spring. The one thing to look at specifically is that national percentage or national percentile ranking, because that's the number that we use to kind of determine where we're going to start seeing some indicators of risk with students. And then we look on into those individual subtests. For second through fifth grade, it looks very similar. You'll see that testing window, and then you'll see the scores across the screen. You can also see the grade level in which those scores or those tests were administered. If you see the abbreviation CP, one of the terminology that's specific to FastBridge is they identify students above a certain percentile ranking as college pathway. So that's their terminology. It just means that it's very low or almost no area of concern on that specific subtest. Next slide, please. When you pull up your scores, I highly recommend also pulling up the reading screening guide. This is the opening page of the document, and each of the grade levels are hyperlinked down at the bottom. If you have a student in grades 4 through 12 and you as a parent are seeing some concerns, there's also a link on here to that referral form that you could fill out. Next slide, please. When you click to go to look at a specific grade level, I pulled first and third grade because they both look a little bit different. So this is first grade. What you'll see is this is on the left, outlines each of those specific subtests. It explains what the subtest looks at. It gives an example of what we would be administering to the student. And then it gives the benchmarks for fall, winter, and spring. And those benchmarks are laid out kind of visually so that you can see the growth that's expected. Because often if a student shows a similar score in the fall and the winter, the benchmark has increased for that student. So we want to make sure that student's continuing to grow across the year. On the right, this is on the next page of this document. I just took a quick screenshot for you as an explanation of that composite score, what the indicators of risk are, and if we see indicators of risk, what additional assessments we'll give students and how those are reported. Next slide, please. Third grade looks very similar. You can see that we rely a little bit more on A reading on national percentiles instead of risk indicators. But then it also spells out those additional reading assessments and how those are administered for students. So these will always be sent out in that e-note that principals send out, notifying families that those scores are available in SIS. Great, next slide. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Handy.
All right, so I don't know how many slides Sarah had, but I have one. So mine's going to seem a little lackluster after that. But one of the ways we track some data in our elementary mathematics is through iReady. Now, iReady is different than FastBridge and NWA, EA, and some of the other assessments we're going to hear about, because iReady just came along with our new program, which is iReady Classroom Mathematics. So it wasn't a separate purchase. This came along with our math program. It fits in with our math program. It's measuring exactly what the students are learning, what the teachers are teaching. As you can see, those are the 4 domains that we test. And the test is pretty simple. It is computer-based, and students are either doing computations or calculations, or they're solving problems. We use this as a formative assessment. So if you compare it to the MAP test that we get the state, everyone's trying to get to a certain benchmark, trying to get proficient. iReady we use mainly for teachers to determine where students are in their learning, so they know what to teach next. So our teachers are very responsive to the data that they receive through iReady. We also, it's adaptive, and Dr. Valter talked about adaptive tests a while ago. So depending upon how you're doing on the questions, the test changes. So the person next to you is not going to have the same tests that you have. One thing that's somewhat difficult for students sometimes with an adaptive test is you cannot ace an adaptive test, because it's going to progressively get more difficult the better you're doing. So I know that can be frustrating for those students who always want to get a perfect score or ace it. But it gives us great information great data on where our students are in their actual learning of mathematics. So we really use it as a formative assessment to help guide us in our instruction and to let us know exactly where our students are in their learning. And I think that is really all there is to say. I don't have all the fancy graphs and everything that Dr. Valter said. I feel very underwhelming right now, so I apologize. But that's what iReady is. It gives us some great data. It's it's on the computer and it matches the program we use in the classrooms. I will now go sit in the Q&A and answer all of the questions you guys are going to flood me about mathematics. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm very excited to talk about our newest assessment. Well, I guess iReady is our newest assessment tool, but as far as I'm just going to go with this is our newest assessment tool that we have for our students in grades 4 through 9th grade in English Language Arts and for students 4th through 8th grade in mathematics. And that is the Northwest Evaluation Association. NWEA is often what you'll hear it referred to, math growth. Now that math growth piece is so confusing because you see the term math and you think, oh, the state level assessment, the Missouri assessment plan, but it is not that, it is not the same math. So you will hear us talking about math state testing or NWEA math growth. So sorry for that confusion. I wish we just have to make things confusing, I guess, from time to time, but I will always clarify if there's ever any questions. Now, this particular assessment, I can't even start to talk about without acknowledging how amazing our teachers are. So I wanted to talk about the time that we began to implement this assessment was in the fall of the 2021 school year. And so thinking about all the things that our teachers were going through in the fall of 2020, and whether or not we had some students in the classroom, some students at home, virtual, some teachers teaching concurrently, hybrid, all kinds of things going on. And our students were trying to manage all the details of that while also hearing the district say, we really want to administer this math a growth assessment because we still really honor achievement. We want to see how our students are doing, especially after there was quite a bit of learning taken away from them in the spring before. So this is our newest tool. Our teachers are amazing and they are still working through this assessment tool to see how we can utilize it and just continuously monitor the growth of our students. So we began this in, like I said, in 2020-21. And if you look at the map of reading domains, we'll call them performance levels here. It's really looking at reading and evaluating literary text, reading and evaluating informational text, and vocabulary development. So those domains, those performance areas differ from our state level assessment. They really focus in on that reading component because that's the assessment tool we administer. When you get into math, you'll see a lot more similarities to the state test. So we have data statistics, data analysis, statistics, probability, geometry and measurement, relationships and algebraic thinking, and number sense and operations. So that is a little bit about what is assessed on that on the NWEA assessment. Next slide. So Craig talked a little bit about this, and this is a computer adaptive assessment. He talked about iReady being a computer adaptive assessment. And Sarah talked about FastBridge A reading, and that is also a computer adaptive assessment. So what that means to be an adaptive assessment is it really digs into where the students are and their readiness to learn. So let me just kind of set this up in the opposite here. So if you think about the grade level assessment and the end of course assessment that the state gives us, that is a fixed form assessment. So any questions that students are answering on those particular assessments are going to only be set at the complexity level of that particular grade level. When you get into NWEA and other adaptive assessments, students will start, the test will start to shift on the level of, with the items of complexity based on how students are answering questions, correct or not correct. And Craig mentioned it really well. This is quite a shift for our students who are wanting to get that 100% on an assessment. Now on a state assessment, on a fixed form assessment, you can get that. On an adaptive assessment, you cannot, because what the tool is doing, what the assessment tool is doing, is trying to figure out exactly where you are in your learning. So the adaptive assessment has multiple complexity of items within the particular assessment. So let's take a kid through this assessment. I love this graphic because it kind of shows how a student would answer questions and how the test questions would move for that particular student. So if a student starts on the NWEA assessment, they start, depending on if it's their first time taking the test or if they've taken the test before, it will vary. But if it's their first time taking the test, it's going to start the student at grade level. And depending on how the student answers that question correctly, they will move up, and they will continuously move up in complexity based on if they're getting those questions right. Then the questions get harder. And so that the students may start to get a couple of questions wrong, and the test will adapt, and different complexity of items will come in as the student gets down there. And what the test is trying to do is get right in that 50-50. So where are students really answering those questions? At what range are students answering these complex items? And that is how it comes up with the student's particular RIT score. And that RIT score stands for RASH unit. And so another way to describe that is that scale score. So just like you saw on the grade level assessment, SIS picture in the beginning, it gives a scale score. That RIT is the same thing. It is a scale score on how that student performed. So if you look over here to the left of this graphic, you'll see item difficulty. That's the RIT. So the scale starts on this particular graphic from 180 and goes all the way up to 250. So depending on where that student scores on that first question and how they end towards the end is where they will receive their particular scale score. So that is just a little bit about that. A little bit more about the fixed form and the adaptive. There's pros and cons to both of them, but one of the really amazing things about an adaptive assessment is it really hones in on that student's precise ability level, There's no floor, no ceiling. We're going to find out exactly where a student is in their ability to perform well and show growth on a reading assessment or on a math assessment. When we get into the grade level assessment and its fixed forms, we are put in a box in a little bit. And there are some pros to that too, I can talk about, but when it comes to really identifying where a student is and where they need to go, having an adaptive assessment is really a great tool to have, because we can see, is the student excelling at multiple grade levels above? Is the student showing areas of concern at multiple grade levels below? Is the student almost there? Just, we're getting there. There's a few things we can do, and we're going to celebrate the success. So it gives us a lot of great information for our students. So when you really think about an adaptive assessment, it's very individualized for the student, and it shows us that learner readiness, exactly where they are. Sometimes we talk about the state level assessments and you say, okay, we know they didn't do well. Where are they particularly? And that kind of is a question that we have found to be not so helpful, or that's an answer we find to be not so helpful when we're trying to address a student right where they are. So if you go on to the next slide, I wanted to show this. This is not a parent report. So I'm sorry, because I think you would love this. But this is a teacher report, and I think it's really great for our parents and families to see this, because it really illustrates how the growth component of NWEA plays such an important role. So I'm going to kind of walk you through this, and hopefully I won't bore you and we keep the same amount of participants, but I think this is a really exciting graphic for you guys to see. Over to the bottom left of the screen, you're going to see it's a quadrant, and we see in the red, we have low achievement and low growth. As I move up on that quadrant into the orange section, I see low achievement, high growth. Down at the bottom on the right side, I see high achievement and low growth. And then up at the top in the green quadrant, I see high achievement and high growth. So guess where we want our kids to be? We want them to be in that high achievement, high growth. That is, we're rocking it. The kids are rocking it. The teachers are rocking it. That is exactly where we want to be. However, we don't want to take for granted when a student starts in a low achievement part of the quadrant and then shows a lot of high growth and moves up to that orange bar. We want to celebrate that. That test met them in the performance area where they were on that first administration. And when they took it a second time, third time, or whatever, they moved up that quadrant and are showing growth. That is something our students need to celebrate. Sometimes we look at fixed form assessments and we say, nope, you just didn't do well. Story's over. Okay, off till the next spring. But in this particular assessment, we can take a look at that and say, you are doing the work. You are doing a great job. And also, if you think about our gifted students who are coming in, they're already over in that yellow bottom right quadrant. They're already high achieving. And we need to say and look at that and say, are we moving you? Are you still showing the appropriate amount of growth that you need to show to meet your goals? Don't just say, I'm on grade level expectations. This is where I am. I'm high achievement. It's over. No, let's keep pushing. Let's keep going. We can go further. And so that is where we want to move those kids up to that green quadrant where we have our students in high achievement and high growth. And I really wanted to focus in on math because I knew Sarah was going to talk a lot about reading. So I really wanted to show you an example of a math one. And I am very excited to say that this is one of our teachers' quadrants for their class. And so this is just really exciting because look at their class overall. We have some students are in that high growth area, and that is definitely something to celebrate. And we have our students in that high achievement and high growth. And so definitely kudos to this teacher, and I'll reach out to the teacher after this to say I showed their quadrant. All right, we'll move on to that next one. All right, so we're looking at NWEA growth on SIS. And you guys have those results. You get the e-note from the principal. Those results are in. And so when you go there, you're going to see these different these are different components you're going to see on SIS. And one of those is the test window. So please pay attention to that. You want to know if this was the fall, winter, spring administration of that assessment. And you will also be able to monitor it over the years to see how your student is growing along the way. You will get that RIT RASH unit. You can also call it a scale score. We call it the RIT score. So hopefully our parents are using that same language with us. So our kids are hearing that language and thinking about how can I grow on that RIT score and get that higher and higher. So the RIT score represents the conceptual difficulty of the math growth assessment items. So how they performed on particular items of complexity is what will indicate their RIT score. The percentile is that data point that indicates how your student performed in comparison to their grade level peers. And this is really great information for our students to do. If you really look at or to see, and our families to see as well, in comparison to our peers, my child's doing pretty well. Or in comparison to my child's grade level peers, my child's not doing so well, and we need to have some discussions. And so this is a really good way to measure your child against the performance of other peers. And then you will also have an achievement quintile. And you'll see that another acronym, AQ, just because we have to have that acronym in there. And it will put your student in a particular category. And this is all, these ranges are all based on that percentile. So if your student is in the 20th percentile or below, they will have a low achievement quintile. If they're in the 21st to the 40th, they will have a low average quintile. Average and above is, we really want our students to be there. We want our students to be in the high. I mean, we all want to see our students do really well, but within that average range and above is very important. So the average range is from the 41st to the 60th percentile. The high average is in the 61st to the 80th percentile, and the high is in the 81st to the 99th percentile. So if you go on to the next slide, I know these are hard to see, but I wanted to give you a real picture of what you're going to see on SIS. If you are looking at your student scores, please pay attention to those windows over to the left so you can see where your students are. They will always, the most recent score will always be on the top, and the previous scores, it will go down in sequential order. So we can look at our students' grade that they took this particular assessment. We can see fall to spring. And on this particular one, let's take a look at 6th grade because we got to see it. We saw this growth for this student move from 218 RIT score all the way up to 233. And we saw a student grow in their quintile range from average to high average. And so again, we hope to continue to see that growth over time. We know that there are some factors I really want to talk to our parents about. When we get to the spring, we get something called testing fatigue. We get a little tired. We got the state tests coming in and interrupting our awesome growth data from NWEA, but we know it's required and we know it's very important. So we take that very seriously, but we have our kids getting a little tired towards the spring. And so I would really love if our families would buy into this, talk about this information with their kids, set those goals with their students, tell your kids you value this and you want to see them do well, celebrate with your students. And the same for teachers to do the same thing. Acknowledge the impact you're having on our students in the classroom and all the great things that you are doing. And it's so nice that you can see this data grow and see that on a screen. So down at the bottom is just another way we break it down so you can get some more information as a parent and looking at number sense and relationships, algebraic thinking, and so on, those different performance areas so that you can see where your students are, because this is a great piece of information for you. You may find my student is just doing such a great job in number sense and operations, but we really need to work on that geometry and measurement. How can I get engaged with my students' learning? How can I talk to the teacher if I have those concerns? So this just helps you break it down even more. Next slide. All right, so this is just a picture of the results for NWEA, a little bit about what it is, why is my child taking the NWEA assessment, how do I interpret these results, and it's a little bit of the same information that I shared with you on those previous slides. So if you go to the next one, we always want to know, how do we use these results? And I think that we all as a community and a stakeholder in every child's education all need to dig into these assessments and also talk about the ways that we can use them. And you may even have great ideas that you can share with us. But families, we ask that you discuss those strengths, you celebrate those strengths with your students. They work so hard. I mean, any type of growth you see, you're acknowledging that and really showing them that you value it, you're looking at it, and you are just so proud. And also, if there's areas of concerns, talk to your student. There may be some things that you learn from talking with your child that can maybe help us in the classroom, help better support the student, and really look for that growth for your students and acknowledge that. For the buildings, how we use it to identify areas of strength, concern, and growth. We're looking at ways we can determine those instructional needs to provide interventions and enrichments for students who are just going off the charts and going beyond those grade levels. How can we keep stretching and pushing our kids to go further and further? So there's a lot of great ways that we can use this data. We're a year and a half in, and I think we're just going to uncover even more great ways that we can use this data to help us support our students. Moving on to the next one, I'm going to go ahead and start us out a little bit on this, but I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Zagor so she can get into a little bit more about those awesome, amazing things that the high school is doing that are really setting our kids up for that college and career readiness. And so just to kind of go over to the left, we're going to talk a little bit about state required assessments that happen just at the high school outside of just the grade level, and in the course assessments, talk a little bit about those district assessments that they are doing. And then also she's going to share some great advanced options that you can, your students can participate in to really get ready for college and or career.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Lawson. So those tests that are there in bold are ones that are visible to families in SIS. But in addition to those, we have a lot of college and career preparedness tests that are some that are required for our students and some that are optional for students. And so beginning with those state required tests, at the high school level, the DESE mandated tests are end of course exams. And so those are required in those courses that you see listed there. And so those students take those end of course exams, that state standardized test upon completion of that course at whatever grade level they're taking that course. And then also required by state statute is that the state of Missouri requires that every student pass tests that cover the US Constitution and Missouri Constitution, as well as a test that is a civics or citizenship exam. And so the state law requires that that be a 100 question multiple choice test that mirrors the United States citizenship test, and all students have to pass that upon prior to graduating from high school. And so those are tests that we administer with our own teachers. The Constitution and Civics tests are Lindbergh written exams, but they do meet the state requirements and guidelines. And so we embed those into our social studies curriculum. Our students take those Constitution tests in 10th grade, that civics test in 11th grade. And then we also try, as best that we can, not to overload students with too many tests in the same season. And so our civics test is given in the fall. Students do have the option to take that multiple times if they need to, and our teachers do a great job of preparing students for it and also helping them to prepare for those reassessments if needed. And then at the district level, we do use the NWEA MAP growth test with our English 1 students. So those are our 9th grade students. We just began that this year, and it's been very successful. And then all of our high school students take a practice ACT both in 10th grade and 11th grade. And this gives us some really wonderful data to help prepare our students for the ACT test ultimately that will count that they may choose to take as an 11th or 12th grader, but it also helps inform our instruction with our students. The ACT test, while it is a college preparedness exam, it also really, we consider it a career preparedness exam as well, because those communication skills and reasoning and math skills are skills that our students are going to need, whether they are workforce bound or college bound or anything else. And so the results from that test, we do get, they're actually retired ACT exams. So they are ACT tests that previously have been used by the College Board as a real ACT. And we get really great data that drills down into those subtests and what specific skills those students have excelled in or could use additional support in. And so we do use them as a teaching tool. And then for our students that are college bound, there are a number of tests that are optional for them. For example, advanced placement exams at the end of those advanced placement courses that we offer beginning in high school, the PSAT, which is a practice SAT test for students, and also is the qualifying test for the National Merit Scholarship Competition. And so it's optional, but we do have a lot of 10th graders and 11th graders that take that. We do still give the International Baccalaureate exams for the students that are finishing out the IB program. Seal of Biliteracy is a credential that our students can earn by the time they finish high school. And so that certifies them as a biliterate student in English and a language other than English. And so for some students, they use their AP exam as the qualifying test for that. But we also have students that take a different test that aren't on that AP track, but still could qualify to take a language test to qualify for that Seal of Biliteracy. And then, of course, our traditional college readiness exams, the ACT and the SAT. I think that's it.
Okay, we're going to open it up for questions. So just ignore this. Thank you for attending this session. We still have a little time to answer questions.
We do have a few questions, a couple of themes. A couple of the questions revolve specifically around state assessment and where we are with regard to district rankings and where we've been in the past. I want to take you back to 2018 and our listening and learning tour that Dr. Lake provided throughout the community really highlighted and asked our community, what do we value? What's important? As you know, as he entered into the district as superintendent, we had really centered our work around the MAP assessment, the state assessment, and really prioritized that in terms of how we measure the success that we have as a district. Through his listening and learning tour, there were different measures that were identified as priorities. Highly qualified teachers, social and emotional learning of our students and staff, personalized learning experiences, the 4 C's and student satisfaction. So taking that data, we really needed to undo some of the trends that we had as a district, which were the work that we were doing around the MAP assessment. And so what you see tonight is really a reflection of that work. Because we are looking at district assessments that have a more significant impact on day-to-day instruction and using that data to inform what happens for student learning, we're able to do more with personalized learning. We're looking at the social emotional learning components because we really want to focus on what are the holistic elements of what makes a student successful as opposed to a once per year assessment that measures a single point in time. So while those assessments have been deprioritized, we've seen that change in rankings, but that has not impacted the reality that our student academics are at the forefront of the decisions that we're making, and we're using other measurements that are really the focus of growing our student learning experiences. I think two things are, the other thing I really want to highlight with that is much of the conversation around rankings for this year specifically, or last year, have much to do with our messaging around the MAP test. So obviously in the 2020 spring assessment, we didn't have the MAP assessment. 2021, we told our families, this is not our priority. So for the 30% of our families who were having their students participate in virtual learning, we did not prioritize them coming in for the MAP test. On top of that, for those families who did come in to take the assessment, we did not prioritize the time that we had done in previous years. So our messaging was very different than what happened throughout the state. So our ranking does not look comparable to what, or our scores do not look comparable to what was happening throughout the rest of the state. So that is what I would definitely call an outlier. And I don't feel like that ranking can have any impact on success in the work of the district over the last couple of years. Anything anyone would like to add to that, to the questions about rankings? Because I know that's been a hot topic.
I haven't looked at the ranking. I wonder how many districts are included in it that are public, like public schools, or their charter schools are selected, they select student schools. I haven't looked at it. So I'm just curious, maybe it's something to dig into a little bit more and see how that is even developed and who's even doing it. So interesting.
And then Ronnie, we have a question here about ACTs and SATs. I know you enjoy this topic.
So the question was, are colleges and universities getting rid of the ACT and SAT? And so there's definitely been a shift where a lot of colleges and universities are no longer requiring the ACT or SAT. That said, I would say those tests still, by the majority, are considered reliable or at least maybe the best available indicators of college preparedness regarding students' academic skills. And so, a lot of students are still opting to take it because they're hoping that they'll do well, and that may be a factor in their college admissions. There's a very much a shifting landscape when it comes to the post-secondary world. And I know a lot of colleges and universities are really trying to develop a more well-rounded college admissions process. It's a very difficult game because, they get thousands and thousands of applicants, and they have to have some measures to help narrow their field and determine which students they're going to admit. And so we are trying to support our students to make sure that, if they want to take those college entrance exams, then we encourage them to take them, but also to support them and make sure that they have a broad portfolio of experiences that are preparing them and making them eligible for admission to the higher ed institutions that they want to attend. So in addition to those kinds of tests and other tests that students take, like AP exams and other things, we really try to encourage our students to get a lot of experiences when it comes to student leadership and community service and just, hobbies and skills and other things that make them well-rounded. And we're trying to, long-term weave in our Lindbergh Life success skills with the student experience so that they can build a portfolio that says so much more about them than what a handful of data points would say. So, I think college is some ways is trying to keep up with high schools on this, but then also, we're trying to make sure that our students are prepared for the reality of what college admissions does still look like in most institutions.
Looks like those are all of our questions. I just really want to thank everyone who joined us tonight. Like I said at the beginning of the session, there was a lot of information that we shared with you, and I realize that can be overwhelming at times. So please, if at any time you have further questions, we as a teaching and learning team are here to support you, clarify anything. And I see Craig is raising his hand right now because he has something further he would like to share.
There was a question and I answered it in the chat, but I just wanted to make sure that they saw it. I was afraid maybe they didn't see it, what I typed, but the question was, do we teach balanced literacy or phonics in the elementary? So the easy answer is both. So let me answer on both sides there, make it nice and simple for you. But actually balanced literacy is an umbrella term that should mean that we're teaching phonics, phonemic awareness, reading skills, comprehension, and word work. And we do all of those. You're going to find phonics and phonemic awareness more in the K and 1, maybe even up into the 2. And then you're going to lean a little bit more towards comprehension and word work as the kids get older. But it's not an either or, it's all of it.
Thank you. All right, as I was saying, I thank you for your time tonight. I know we went over what we usually allot for speaker series, but this is a rich topic with a lot of information. And we appreciate you joining us tonight. Hope you have a great evening.